The city stretched beneath me like a living, breathing canvas, skyscrapers glittering under the early morning sun, cars humming along the avenues, and the soft whisper of the wind teasing the sheer silk of my blouse. I perched on the edge of my office balcony, coffee in hand, and scrolled through my phone, the familiar buzz of notifications feeling almost too intimate, too intrusive. One message caught my eye: "Family meeting tomorrow. Don't forget who you are." I laughed softly, a sound that felt strange even to me, part disbelief, part irony. They still thought they knew me, still assumed my life was small, unremarkable, predictable. I had long stopped correcting them. The truth was far too delicious to ruin with words. My reflection in the glass behind me showed a composed, polished woman, chestnut hair pulled back in a perfect twist, nails freshly painted, heels clicking softly against the marble floor. They would see all of this tomorrow, but none of it would hint at the years of struggle, the nights spent on floorboards counting every penny, the countless doors slammed in my face. I breathed in, savoring the coffee's warmth, the sunlight on my skin, the quiet before the storm. My heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but anticipation. Tomorrow, everything would change. I had kept my life hidden long enough. And when they finally looked up, expecting the girl they had belittled, they would meet someone entirely unrecognizable. I can still remember that night like it was etched into my bones. I was 22, sitting stiffly on the faded couch in my parents' living room, the harsh light of the chandelier catching every wrinkle, every crease in the air of judgment surrounding me. My mother's voice cut through the quiet like glass. "You've never lifted a finger for anyone, and look at you, still struggling. You're poor, Emily. Don't expect us to support you." The words landed like stones in my chest. I felt my throat tighten, a lump forming that no amount of swallowing could dissolve. My hands shook, betraying the calm I tried to fake. My father didn't even look at me. His silence was louder than her words. For the first time, I realized that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally were ready to define my worth by my bank account. Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to give them that satisfaction. Instead, I looked down at the small, worn leather notebook resting on my lap, the gift from Grandma Ruth, who had always believed I could rise higher than I ever imagined. "Write your dreams, Emily," she had said, pressing it into my hands. "No one else can limit you unless you let them. One day, they'll see you differently, but it will be on your terms." That night, I closed the door to their judgment behind me and walked out into the cold, indifferent streets. The city smelled of wet asphalt and possibility, a strange mix that made my heart ache with both fear and excitement. I didn't have much, just my determination, that notebook, and the memory of my grandmother's unwavering belief. But it was enough. I made a promise to myself as I stared at the distant skyline. I would never be defined by anyone else's opinion again. I would build my own life, my own success, and when the time came, they would see who I had truly become. And so, with trembling hands but a fierce heart, I took the first step toward independence, leaving behind the familiar voices that had once sought to diminish me. The streets I wandered that night smelled of rain and opportunity, even if I couldn't see it yet. I took temporary jobs, waitressing, tutoring, anything that could keep the lights on and the rent paid. Each night, I returned to my tiny studio apartment, the notebook from Grandma Ruth always open on my desk. I scribbled plans, sketches, ideas, and dreams as if the ink could summon the life I longed for. It wasn't easy. Some days I wanted to quit, to crawl back into the safety of what I had left behind. But then I remembered my grandmother's words, "No one else can limit you unless you let them." That mantra became my armor. Eventually, I stumbled into my first mentor, Claire Thompson, a sharp-witted woman running a small marketing firm downtown. She saw me fumbling through a networking event, trembling yet determined, and she asked the question no one had before. "What do you want, really?" I told her. I told her about the family, the dismissal, the hunger to create something that was mine alone. Claire didn't flinch. She didn't offer pity. Instead, she handed me a business card and said, "Prove it." And I did. Nights blurred into mornings. I learned every nuance of marketing, the fine art of persuasion, the delicate dance of client relations. There were setbacks, projects that failed, opportunities that slipped through my fingers, but with each failure, I grew sharper, stronger, more strategic. My first big win came with a small but high-profile client, a local boutique that needed a digital overhaul. The campaign went viral. It was exhilarating, intoxicating. I felt, for the first time, the weight of possibility in my own hands. Soon after, another client, and then another, each one a brick building the foundation of the life I was constructing in secret. I never posted about it online. My social media remained sparse, unremarkable, a facade of modesty that kept my family guessing. I wanted them to assume I was still struggling, to keep their underestimation intact. There was a delicious thrill in knowing they had no idea that every success, every milestone, was mine alone to savor. Through it all, I paid attention to the details that shaped my world. The click of my heels across polished floors, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee before an important call, the way my silk scarf shifted when I leaned over a desk brainstorming campaigns. These small observations grounded me, reminded me I was creating a life I could fully inhabit and enjoy. By the time I was 30, my company had grown beyond anything I could have imagined in that tiny apartment. I had offices, clients, a name that commanded respect, and yet, none of my family knew the truth. I was a shadow in their eyes, a memory of failure. And I liked it that way, because soon, the shadow would step into the light, and the woman they had mocked would be unrecognizable. The day of the family meeting arrived like any other in appearance, but my pulse thrummed with quiet anticipation. I stood in my private office, silk blouse perfectly pressed, hair glossy, nails a deep burgundy that caught the light just so. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the storm about to unfold within these walls. When they arrived, I let them wander the space for a few moments. The subtle luxury of the office, the hand-selected art, the polished oak shelves lined with awards, the gleaming desk holding contracts and plans for upcoming projects, spoke for itself. I stayed quiet, watching their eyes flicker from one detail to another. The abstract painting I had commissioned, the sleek tech on every surface, the faint scent of fresh flowers that softened the sharp edges of wealth. "Emily," my mother's voice finally broke through, tight questioning. She looked around, the edges of her mouth twitching. I didn't realize this is impressive." Impressive? I let the word hang in the air for a heartbeat longer than necessary, enjoying the subtle crack in her composure. "Thank you," I said smoothly, my voice calm but firm, each word deliberate. "I'm glad you noticed." I gestured toward the balcony, where a sleek helicopter waited, its blades slowly spinning in the gentle breeze, a last-minute touch that would solidify the disbelief I could see creeping into their faces. "Shall we step outside?" I asked. Their eyes widened as we emerged. The helicopter gleamed under the sun, and I could almost hear the gears of their assumptions grinding to a halt. "I thought you said you were struggling," my father stammered, his usual confidence fractured. I smiled, not cruelly, but with the serene satisfaction of someone who had silently conquered everything she had been told she couldn't. "I never said I was struggling," I replied. "You just assumed it. I've built my life exactly the way I wanted, quietly, deliberately, and yes, successfully." I let them take it in, the helicopter, my elegant office, the subtle signs of wealth that had always been invisible to them. I spoke of my company, my clients, the portfolio I had nurtured from nothing, and the empire I had constructed without their approval or attention. Each sentence landed like a stone, shaking the foundation of the assumptions they had held for so long. Disbelief flickered across my mother's eyes, mingling with guilt, shame, and an unspoken acknowledgement of her earlier cruelty. My father's jaw tightened. He wanted to speak, to reclaim some authority, but the words caught in his throat. Their siblings and cousins shuffled awkwardly, mouths open, unsure how to respond. I let silence stretch, letting the weight of their astonishment settle in. For years, they had defined me, labeled me, dismissed me as someone poor, and insignificant. Now, they were forced to confront the reality of a woman they had underestimated, a woman who had quietly mastered every obstacle they had set in her path. Finally, I let the final piece fall into place. This life, I said, eyes steady, was built on every doubt you cast at me, every word you said to make me feel small. I didn't just survive, I thrived. And I did it on my own terms. The air was thick with silence, and for the first time, they had nothing to say. They could only see the truth, dazzling and undeniable, in front of them. The shock on their faces was delicious, but I didn't linger on it. This was not about revenge. It was about establishing the boundaries I should have demanded years ago. I stood tall, letting the authority of my presence fill the space, my eyes sweeping over each of them, silently measuring who had learned nothing and who might still be worth my time. "I'm willing to help," I began, my voice calm but firm, "but on my terms. If anything is going to change between us, it starts with honesty and effort. You can no longer assume I'll bend to old patterns of criticism and control." My mother's lips pressed together, guilt flickering in her eyes. I continued, laying out conditions like a blueprint for growth. First, you must drop the habit of defining people by their wealth. Judge by character, effort, and integrity instead. I saw her flinch slightly. Her old lens had blinded her for decades. Second, you must pursue your own dreams instead of trying to control mine. I've done my work. Now it's time for you to step into the life you've avoided because it seemed too hard. My father's shoulders stiffened, but I held his gaze evenly, refusing to let guilt derail the message. And third, you must leave behind toxic patterns, ridicule, belittling, and assumptions. If any of you step back into my life carrying that old weight, you will find no welcome here. I watched them process it, their faces a mixture of disbelief, shame, and slowly dawning understanding. Some shifted uncomfortably, realizing for the first time that they had taken my kindness for granted, my patience for weakness. I softened slightly, letting compassion seep through the firmness. "I care about you all," I said, "but caring doesn't mean compromising my values. I've built this life on resilience, determination, and integrity. If you want a place in it, you must show you've grown too." The tension in the room began to shift as they murmured promises, tentative but real. I could feel the power dynamic change, not through anger, but through quiet, undeniable authority. This wasn't about punishing them, it was about showing them the standard of respect, effort, and love that I would no longer negotiate. I paused for a moment, letting my gaze linger on the helicopter waiting outside, a simple nod of arrogance, but of the heights I had reached without their support. And in that pause, I felt a surge of satisfaction. Not vindictive, but liberated. I was finally free to define the terms of my own life, and for the first time, they were standing in a world where I held the cards. I stepped back, letting silence speak the final piece. They had the chance to meet me in full truth, to rise with me, or to stay in the shadows of the past. Either way, the power had shifted. Weeks passed after that day, and the air between us shifted in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. My family began to change, not overnight, not perfectly, but enough to show that growth was possible. My mother started volunteering at a local nonprofit she had always dismissed, discovering a fulfillment she had never known. My father enrolled in a professional development program, tackling the fears he had disguised as criticism for years. Even my younger cousins began asking for advice instead of sneers, curious about the life I had quietly built. I watched it all from my office one evening, sunlight spilling across my desk, the leather notebook from Grandma Ruth open beside me. The same notebook that had once been my lifeline, my spark of hope, now served as a reminder of how far I had come. Each page was a testament to resilience, vision, and the quiet courage to rise alone when no one else believed in you. I reflected on the years of struggle, the countless nights spent working through exhaustion, the small victories that no one applauded, and the constant effort to hide my success until the moment it mattered most. It hadn't been easy, and sometimes I had doubted whether I could endure. But looking back now, I realized that every insult, every dismissal, every "you're poor" remark had fueled me rather than broken me. The helicopter still waited outside for meetings, events, or travel, but its presence no longer felt like a show of wealth. It was a symbol of freedom. The freedom to live fully, on my terms, without apology or compromise. The freedom to offer guidance and love only when it aligned with respect and growth. I picked up the notebook, fingers brushing the worn leather, and smiled. Grandma Ruth's words echoed in my mind. No one else can limit you unless you let them. Indeed, I had learned to live by them, not just survive by them, and now I could pass on the lesson quietly through my actions. I closed the notebook gently, standing by the window and watching the city lights flicker on. The woman I had become was strong, independent, and unapologetically herself. And as I whispered to the quiet room, I realized that the power, the success, and the respect were no longer something I needed to prove. They were simply mine. I am not the girl you underestimated. I am the woman I chose to become.